This movie is such a classic. Let's do it. Child's Play opens up with this detective chasing down this serial killer named Charles Lee Ray. The chase eventually leads them into this toy store where we see all of these good guy dolls in their boxes. Charles Lee Ray also has an accomplice named Eddie Caputo who manages to flee the scene. And Charles Lee Ray ends up getting shot by the detective, and as he's lying on the ground dying, he pulls out one of the good guy dolls and performs this voodoo ritual. This causes his soul to be transferred into the good guy doll before he dies. It's a very dramatic scene. The skies open up, the building is struck by lightning, but eventually he finishes the ritual and the detective finds Charles Lee Ray's lifeless body. Then we cut and we meet Karen Barkley and her 6-year-old son, Andy, and all Andy wants for his birthday is a good guy doll. Karen makes it very clear that she's not able to afford one for him right now, so she's gonna have to get him one eventually. Karen goes to work that day where she runs into her friend Maggie, who tells her there's a peddler in the alleyway and he's selling good guy dolls. So she's super excited that she's found one for cheap. She pays the guy, takes the doll, and brings it home to Andy, who's ecstatic. Now, part of the appeal of the good guy dolls is they speak. They can say a certain number of phrases, and this specific good guy doll introduces himself to Andy as Chucky. He says, "Hi, I'm Chucky." So everything seems to be going great, and that night, Karen has to go to work to cover somebody's shift, so Maggie stays and babysits Andy. And this is when we see Chucky come to life for the first time, because of course, he's not really Chucky. Inside of him is the soul of Charles Lee Ray. While Andy's in bed, Chucky comes to life and attacks Maggie with a hammer and then pushes her out the window and she dies. So Karen comes home completely distraught and she finds Detective Mike Norris, who's the detective that shot Charles Lee Ray earlier, in her house investigating. Norris starts to think that Andy was somehow involved in Maggie's death because he sees these little footprints. And of course, we know they're not Andy's, they're Chucky's. And Andy tries to tell them Chucky did it, which of course they're not believing. And Andy tells them, "No, I swear Chucky did it, and his real name is Charles Lee Ray. He told me." But of course, they still don't believe him. Next day, instead of going to school, we see Andy take Chucky and get on a bus because Chucky convinces Andy to take him to the house of Eddie Caputo, his accomplice that abandoned him that night. Chucky goes in and causes an explosion on the stove, which kills Eddie Caputo out of revenge for leaving him. Police once again find Andy at the scene of this crime and now are even more suspicious of him, a 6-year-old child. They bring Andy into the police station and of course call his mom, and they tell her that they want to put Andy in a psychiatric hospital for observation. They actually don't really give her a choice, they just tell her, "We're doing this." Karen has no other choice but to go home with Chucky. She's now getting suspicious of this doll because she knows her son wouldn't do anything like this. And sure enough, she goes to open the little slot on his back where the battery pack is and discovers that there are no batteries in him. So he's been talking and moving this whole time without batteries. So she holds him and she goes to light the fireplace and looks at him and says, "Speak to me or I'll throw you into the fire." It's at this point Chucky finally comes alive to Karen and calls her a stupid bitch and a fucking slut and attacks her. Karen manages to fight him off and then Chucky escapes from the apartment. So Karen runs to frantically tell Norris what just happened, but of course he doesn't believe her either. He thinks that she's just trying to get her son out of the psychiatric hospital and cover up for him. So Karen ends up being like, "Okay, fuck you. I'm gonna go find the peddler that I bought him from and see if I can get more information." So she finds the peddler, who then proceeds to attack her and try to SA her. Norris had followed her and shows up and saves her. He gets the peddler to admit that he got the good guy dolls from the destroyed store the night that Charles Lee Ray was killed. Norris is still skeptical at this point until he is attacked by Chucky that night when he pops up in the backseat of his car. A struggle ensues, Norris flips the car, and ultimately he's able to fight Chucky off and shoot him, which causes Chucky to bleed. So Chucky ends up going to the house of this guy named John, who is the guy who taught him voodoo. And he's like, "I'm bleeding, I don't know what to do, I need to know how to get out of this body." And John tells him the longer you stay in the doll, the more human you will become in the doll. It's why you're bleeding. The only way to get out of the doll is to transfer your soul into somebody else. And the person that you have to transfer your soul into is the first person that you revealed yourself to. Chucky's like, "Great, that's a 6-year-old boy." So Chucky leaves to go find Andy because he knows now that he has to transfer his soul into Andy's body. Meanwhile, Karen and Mike, who are tracking Chucky, find John bleeding out because Chucky had tortured him to get answers. John eventually dies, but before he does, he's able to reveal to the two of them that the only way to kill Chucky is to destroy his heart. Chucky eventually arrives at the hospital where Andy is being kept under observation. Chucky sees that he's in the building and tries to warn the doctor and everybody there, but of course they don't listen to him. Chucky ends up killing Andy's doctor with this electroshock therapy device. So this allows Andy to be able to escape, and he runs out and tries to go home. Chucky chases him there and knocks him unconscious. He gets over Andy and starts doing the ritual to transfer his soul. Before he's able to finish the ritual, Karen and Mike show up and a struggle ensues between the three of them. Ultimately, Mike and Karen are able to set Chucky on fire. They think that this kills him. Andy goes to get a first aid kit for Mike. When he comes back, he realizes that Chucky's gone. Sure enough, a now very burned Chucky attacks them again. Karen manages to shoot him and literally shoots his head and his limbs off, which appear to kill him. And it's at this point that Mike's partner arrives and they try to tell him, and he just doesn't believe them. That is, until Chucky's headless, mostly limbless body bursts through a vent and attacks them again. Karen screams at Mike to shoot him through the heart. Mike does just that, shoots Chucky in the heart, and finally actually kills him. Until the sequel, of course.